It's round 7, and it is going to be Tyler Kennedy on Black-Red Aggro, a deck that we have seen all day. And who is he squaring up and facing down? Luis Salvato, currently number 3 in the race for Player of the Year, and with every single win approaching the ability to take down either Reed Duke and possibly Seth Manfield. He's 5-1 here today. A win means that he'll be showing up tomorrow. If not, he'll definitely have a shot at it next round as well. But it's Esper Control versus Beaumont Courier currently.
Yeah, now, Beaumont Courier, we've said this time and time again throughout the weekend, but this card is a very serious threat against the Blue Blaze decks in this standard format. So, Luis, he has to respect these Beaumont Couriers. He's going to have to get these off the table eventually. It's really important for a deck like Luis's to have the right setup of interaction for the early turns of the game, and it looks like he might just be getting run over this time.
Yeah, we see turn 1 Beaumont Courier, turn 2 Beaumont Courier into a Soulscar Mage. The amount of pressure that is already on the battlefield is mounting. It is a lot. It doesn't look like it, but when you're talking about double spelling on turn 2, already you've got 3 very solid attackers in. There's not a whole lot in this Esper Control deck, which excels at a 1-for-1 kind of exchange that can be done against this. It's going to be an Essence Scatter taking down this On-Crop Crasher, and the 3 threats remain.
Yeah, so Luis taking another 3 here. Also, each of those Beaumont Couriers putting another card underneath. This is representing a lot of cards here for Tyler. And you have to remember, Luis, his deck is planning on playing a 1-for-1 game, especially for the early turns. He wants to, trade cards for single cards on the other side of the table and eventually win by pulling ahead with things like Glimmer of Genius or Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Search for Azcanta is another way in which he could do that. But if he doesn't have those early interactive spells, things like Fatal Push, it's going to be extremely difficult for him to be able to stand up against a draw like Tyler's.
Looks like you might be considering a Vraska's Contempt here, maybe in the main phase, to prevent the red mana being able to crack the Beaumont Courier. One thing to note is in Tyler Kennedy's hand, and that's actually going to be the case. We're going to get rid of that one. Those cards are going to remain in exile, face down, absolute mysteries until the end of the game. In Tyler Kennedy's hand, I think he's got 2 lands and a Cut to Ribbons, which will not have many targets, but a Beaumont Courier putting that in the graveyard does mean that he'll have that extra bit of reach later with the Ribbons half of that card.
Now, interesting thing to note here is that, Luis just spent 4 mana to kill a 1-mana threat, and it just, gives us an idea of how powerful the Beaumont Courier is.
We're going to see another card go underneath that Beaumont Courier. It is just an attack for 2. That Soulscar Mage, a 1-2. It's got Prowess, which means that if you are casting non-creature spells, it's going to get +1/+1. Not the case this turn. It's going to be a Canyon Slew joining the battlefield and a Pia Nalar throwing down a Thopter as well as herself. But it's back to Luis Salvato and Pia Nalar. It's a 1-for-1 deck in Esper Control. And on a singular card, it's already going beyond that. Pia Nalar creates 2 threats individually for 3 mana.
Yeah, and Pia Nalar is interesting in the way that, you kind of have to deal with one half of it to prevent them from getting a mana sink when they run out of gas, because it's really easy to take 2 or take 1 for a bunch of turns, even to take 3 for a bunch of turns. But once your opponent runs out of things to do and they're able to just start pumping that Thopter, and that's what they're doing with their mana, it puts you in a really awkward situation where, again, you're forced to use more expensive removal spells on things that are seemingly not requiring a lot of investment from the other player.
Now look at this. It's a main phase Glimmer of Genius. This is a card that is an instant, but we're firing that one down, leaving up a black and a blue mana. Any reason to fire this one off specifically during the main phase before passing it back?
I think there could be a number of reasons why he might do it during his main phase. I think that he might be looking for a main phase for a Fatal Push that he could cast on the Beaumont Courier before Tyler untaps his lands.
Similar to what we saw with that Vraska's Content previously.
Yeah, and Tyler has all of his red mana tapped. He can't just use a mountain to exchange a hand of seemingly useless cards for what's underneath the Beaumont Courier. So wanted to find that specific card, was unable to do so.
The aggressive hits keep coming in. It's Soulscar Mage, Beaumont Courier, Pia Nalar, and the Thopter crashing in. Luis Salvato down to 9 life. 6 mana though, Torrential Gearhulk now online. The only question is there one even in the hand? Because that combined with that Vraska's Contempt would be formidable. And it looks like Rekindling the Phoenix is going to be the draw on Tyler Kennedy's side of the battlefield. And I'm not seeing a Torrential Gearhulk. So it's 5 mana available on the left side of the screen, 6 mana available on the right side. 4 of these creatures on an open field. And it looks like we might have a response prior. So this is with the Beaumont Courier's trigger on the stack. There will be a card exiled to it face down. In response to this, Luis Salvato is going to cast this Glimmer of Genius. We're going to draw 2, and I think one of those might have been the Fatal Push. Oh,
I think you're right.
It looked to me like it was a Torrential Gearhulk and a Fatal Push, and I think that is the case. So we do have 2 instances of that black mana. Taking it down now, comparing the 2 cards in hand, there is one more that is floating around up top. And we are just going to let it happen. One of those in exile, the other one in the graveyard. Just a quick little correction there, because one of them was taken out by Vraska's Contempt. This one taken out by Fatal Push. So was just instinctively putting it with the other one when, in fact, they do need to be in separate zones. The attack still coming in, however. That is the Soulscar Mage, the PNLR, and the Thopter. This is a hit in for 4. Luis Salvato finds himself at 5. And a Rekindling Phoenix joining the battlefield when Salvato has got so few options with only 1 mana to actually stop that.
Yeah, now Salvato down to 5 here, but we know he has this Torrential Gearhulk. We know he has the Vraska's Contempt in his graveyard. I imagine he's going to want to use that Torrential Gearhulk during his main phase. But by doing so, he will prevent Tyler from having a way to respond by killing the Phoenix, making the Phoenix go into an egg, if you will.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier about this PNLR being able to kind of pressure 2 different ways by having access to both the Thopter and the PNLR.
Mm-hmm.
There is still that ability to falter, too. A main phase Torrential Gearhulk means that Tyler can make his entire game plan based on the idea of throwing the Thopter to make sure that that Gearhulk can't block if there is the potential to get into the realm of enough damage. Now, Luis is going to be back up to 7, so it is a bit of a tall order to fill. But there is also, I suppose you could attack in. There is access to that Cut to Ribbons in hand as well. And if you combine that, maybe pre-combat, that would combine with the Power and Toughness. Oh, or you could just Unlicensed Disintegration it.
You could just draw that.
Why not? Take that one down. Salvato goes down to 4, and it's an attack in for 5 because of that prowess from the Soulscar Mage, and that is going to be game 1 going to Tyler Kennedy. Unlicensed Disintegration. He didn't get a permit for that. Do you have to talk to the head judge for that, or is it just as long as it's on the deck list?
I think it's funny because it implies that there is licensing for disintegration.
On COD.
Yeah.
You got to go through the office. You got to fill out 3 different forms for it. You got to get it approved by the right people. A nice licensed disintegration. Maybe for the Return to Kaladesh, we'll get that.
Yeah, the classic.
There's the original. All right.
Yeah.
We must have Paul on the card reader. So, heading into game 2 here, it is Esper, it is black-red aggro. How are you feeling about the sideboards?
So, I think that Luis will be happy to be on the play here, obviously. This is a matchup that's pretty difficult for Luis. We saw him win it earlier, but you really need your removal spells to match up correctly against the threats that your opponent is playing. And once Luis finds himself getting to that mid-stage of the game, if he's still at a healthy life total, if the board is still relatively clear, he's going to be feeling really good about his chances to win. The problem is that Luis needs to draw cards like Cast Down, cards like Fatal Push. If he doesn't have those in his opening hand, he has to risk getting completely run over. There he got pretty lucky that Tyler decided to not be as aggressive, per se, with his activations with those Beaumont Couriers. And, Luis may have even had a chance to get back into that game had the Unlicensed Disintegration not been drawn on that last turn. Still, though, this is not going to be easy for him to win 2 more games, one of which he's going to have to be on the draw. He really needs his removal spells to match up well. I think him making this deck choice was kind of an assumption that the format had become significantly more diverse since the Pro Tour.
And so he was hoping to dodge the majority of these black-red aggro decks and instead come up against what we've really seen throughout the day, a variety of Turbo Fog or the Vinemare decks, because you have access to Detection Tower in the sideboard.
Yeah, things like that. So one of the things that Luis is able to do in matchups like this is in game one, he's able to make the opponent have a lot of cards in their deck that are almost dead cards. So when he plays against these, black-red mid-range decks, they're going to have all this creature removal in their deck that can really only target a Torrential Gearhulk. And if the opponent draws enough of those cards, it's as if they're playing with significantly less cards than you, and their cards don't interact as well. But when we're talking about games 2 and 3, the opponent's going to change their deck. A black-red player is not going to have the same density of removal spells that are just dead cards in those key early turns of the game. So Luis then, he really needs, as I've said before, to have his draw match up well, even more so than he would in the first game.
Is there anything in the sideboard for Luis that really seems to speak to you as the card that's going to help shift this in the right direction?
So Infernal Reckoning, which we saw from Wafo Tapa.
Yep.
That seems like a really nice card here. The fact that you can get things like Scrap Heap Scrounger out of the game like permanently, not having to deal with it anymore. You also get to gain a little bit of life. I think that's a really nice one. It also only costs 1 mana. He also has Yaheni's Expertise, which could be really good at getting the game back to a place where he's feeling good about stuff.
Yeah, -3/-3 to the board does not leave a whole lot remaining.
And then he has 1 copy of Essence Extraction also, which is not the fastest spell, but it's usually going to trade 1-for-1 with a lot of cards in their deck, and it also gains you a little bit of life back. So
sort of like another copy of Vraska's Contempt for smaller creatures.
Yeah, it's funny because it's a card that on surface in most formats would just be tremendous against red opponents. And in this format, it usually feels like even when you play it on something that costs 3 mana, like when you kill an On-Crop Crasher, it already dealt you 3 damage, so you're just kind of refunding that life and breaking even. And I normally want my answers to make me pull ahead a bit.
Gotcha. Boma Courier comes down. It is followed up by a Soulscar Mage, but things are not looking incredible for Tyler Kennedy here. It is a Dragon Skull Summit up against Luis Salvato, who has got this search for Azcanta. And we are just trying to put together a game plan. There is an attack in for 2. More cards underneath this Beaumont Courier, and mana so far looking to be an issue. It's going to be another copy of this Soulscar Mage, but that's going to get quickly met by an Essence Scatter.
And Luis is just in a great position here, able to get the Beaumont Courier off the table while Tyler Kennedy is tapped. I don't know if it's tapped out if you only have 1 land. It's just tapped.
It's all the same thing, yeah.
And he's just taking 1 a turn. He has Teferi in hand. He has Glimmer of Genius in hand. He has this search going, so that should help him find a 4th land.
There it is. It is going to be a tapped land. It's Fetid Pools, but with a 5th mana next turn. Still has access to this Essence Scatter as well. And for 1 mana, there's not a whole lot else that you're really looking to counter. A Shock isn't exactly Salvato's biggest concern. But it's actually going to be a discard to hand size. Scrap Heap Scrounger, not a bad one to discard, but it's not exactly the play that you wanted. Ends up in the graveyard, and it's this Soulscar Mage and this Dragon Skull Summit trying to just... They've got a task ahead of them. It's 2 cards trying to take down the world, and Luis Salvato now fires down this Glimmer of Genius, finds his 5th mana. He's going to pass back this turn, but next turn is going to be a big one. He's going to get to start just unleashing some of these really powerful spells. There's the attack in for 1. We do now have a 2nd mana, and we're actually going to pass the turn back again. Do not need to discard the hand size, though, because it was that land. That was the 8th card and came on down to the battlefield. Azcanta, the Sunken Rune, now in play, transformed from that search for Azcanta.
Yeah, so Tyler, just passing the turn because he does have the Scrounger in his graveyard. Wants to put that back on the battlefield. It's 3 power, effective way to pressure Luis. Uh, Tyler's definitely feeling really bad about this game. I mean, when your opponent is in the early turns of the game putting things like cast down into their graveyard off of their search for Azcanta simply so that they'll hit their land drops and be able to pull further ahead by casting Glimmer of Geniuses. They're playing against your red deck. You cannot be happy.
There's On-Card Crasher. We see Salvato taking a look at both Syncopate and Essence Scatter. Decides that Essence Scatter is the one to go with. Maybe saving that Syncopate for a Scrap Heap Scrounger down the way. Anything else? Maybe even a Rekindling Phoenix. Taking a look here, there is 4 power on the battlefield. There is only 1 open mana, deciding where to assign those ones, and this is going to knock Teferi all the way down to 1 loyalty, and a quick activation brings it back up to 2. It's another copy of Glimmer of Genius. An island hits the battlefield. We're going to want to spend a little bit of mana before the end step. Otherwise, we'll just be losing value.
So Luis, with a bunch of options here, he could just main phase a Gear Hulk, get one of those creatures off the table, or flashback Glimmer of Genius. He could also pass the turn with Gear Hulk up.
Or you could play down another copy of Teferi, click that one up, grab yourself another card, and then when you untap, you will have 2 of these 4 lands actually getting to untap. That was a 1 mana Teferi.
Yeah, and I mean that's great because now he actually has Torrential Gear Hulk mana up for Tyler's turn, so he can he can disallow with that Torrential Gear Hulk.
That is some powerful magic. A little bit of a double take there.
Yeah.
Wasn't Teferi just here? Nah, don't worry about it. There's the attack in, and what will we see? It's just going to be Vraska's Contempt straight up, not even worrying about using that Torrential Gear Hulk yet. That does actually put the first copy of Vraska's Contempt into the graveyard, so maybe prioritizing making sure, instead of just 1 removal spell and block it, let's save this Torrential Gear Hulk down the way. And we've got the Syncopate as well for 1, but that is going to hit the Goblin Chain Whirler, and Tyler Kennedy is left with just a Soulscar Mage against this Teferi, against a Torrential Gear Hulk in hand. Things look dire at this stage in the game. What a difference this game is from our first one.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler was unable to find a second land for a really long time this game. Luis just was able to cast multiple Glimmer of Geniuses before, or I guess a single Glimmer of Genius before his opponent played a second land. He had inexpensive removal spells to interact. This game is just a runaway victory for Luis. It's not particularly close.
Yeah, it would be spectacular just to even see Tyler Kennedy work his way back into a position of threatening. And he's got a couple of options in hand. I think he's got some Planeswalkers. He's finally starting to get his mana together. But if he can find himself into a position where he's actually got Salvato, maybe on the back foot, maybe needing to realign himself, then that would be a huge win considering the position that he started at in this game. It's going to be a Goblin Chain Whirler. We're just going to allow that one, holding up this disallow for another purpose. And it's going to be a quick attack in for 1. Fatal Push eliminates that from the battlefield for Salvato. And Tyler Kennedy is left with just the Goblin Chain Whirler and an untapped Dragon Skull Summit as we see Luis Salvato activate Azcanta the Sunken Rune and find Forsake the Worldly.
Yeah, and there Luis really maximizing his resources on that turn, using all 5 of the untapped mana that he had to activate Azcanta the Sunken Ruin and use a Fatal Push, as opposed to, using something like Essence Extraction to get that Chain Whirler off the board. He realizes that he's under very little pressure, and he can essentially just win this game however he feels like it.
It's going to be Torrential Gear Hulk Cast Down. Actually, the card being chosen here, we've got another copy of what appears to be Vraska's Contempt in hand, too. So when we untap 2 lands, we'll still have access to this. And now there's a Gear Hulk on the battlefield, and this game is really starting to look like it is locked up for Luis Salvato. He's got the 5/6. He's got Counter Magic. He's got Removal. He's got Forsake the Worldly. He's got this Teferi, which is continuing to just tick up, get more cards, drawing 2 cards a turn, having that significant mana advantage on top of the one of, I made my land drops for, turns 2 through 5. This game's a rough one for Kennedy.
Yeah. This is one of those games where if Kennedy were to stack his deck so that he would draw exactly what he would want to for the remainder of the game, I still do not think he would be able to win.
So we get Beaumont Courier on the battlefield, unlicensed disintegration, comes down as a way to attack that Torrential Gearhulk, but a quick disallow eliminates it. Then we get an activation of Azcanta. It's back to Salvato. Looks like Salvato's doing a little bit of scheming. He's got to be feeling good right now. That Teferi up to 7 counters. The big question here is, even if you are Tyler Kennedy, if you are drawing everything that you need, where do you even begin? Do you start with the Torrential Gearhulk? Do you start with the Teferi? Do you start with, trying to come up with some kind of way for the massive card disadvantage that you're at because of the amount of cards in hand? There's just so many angles right now that Salvato is ahead.
Well, the thing is that you need to get the Teferi off the board and the Azcanta the Sunken Ruin off the board and the Torrential Gearhulk off the board. Because the Torrential Gearhulk will kill you in 3 turns.
Yep.
The Teferi has already killed you.
Sure.
You already won the game. You've already lost. And the Azcanta the Sunken Ruin is just a comical amount of extra nails being put into a coffin.
It's Glorybringer, and we're going to activate Azcanta the Sunken Ruin in response, taking a look at what we can get. There is an Essence Scatter in this hand, but Salvato's also got a copy of Vraska's Contempt in hand and might actually just take the clean removal spell right now, not worry about the counterspell, because there's going to be access to just more options. It's going to be casting that cast down, cycling that Forsake the Worldly, and we're going to draw a card for the turn. Doesn't even look at it. Pluses up the Teferi. Has his game plan already lined up.
He's ranked 3rd in the world. He can just look at his opponent, and when you're that good, it doesn't even matter. You can just play the cards face down. You can just figure out what your opponent has.
Whose deck is he playing at this point? Hidden information all across the board for Salvato. The Torrential Gearhulk attacks on in. Tyler Kennedy finds himself down to 10. Teferi at 8 counters right now. An ultimate of that ability. That -8 also imminent if decided so. I think we're choosing those modes, but there is a disallow in hand. If Salvato doesn't want this to happen, it's not going to. And that's going to be the case. Activation there of Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. Taking a look. It's just Infernal Reckoning and 3 lands.
Oh, he doesn't even take the Infernal Reckoning.
I think he wants that to remain as like a hidden information. I don't think he wants Tyler Kennedy to even realize that it's there.
Yeah, no, that's exactly why he didn't take it.
So at this point, Salvato's already planning for game 3.
Oh, yeah. He's activating his Sunken Ruin and not taking cards because he would rather not show them to his opponent.
That is a level of awareness of the situation. I don't need this card. Do I need the blind value that's not going to be relevant, or is it worth it to really be prepared heading into game 3 that there's a piece of technology that I have that Tyler Kennedy does not?
Yeah, I think that, and I think Luis, throughout this weekend when I've watched him play, he's demonstrated a lot of, really advanced, time-saving and information hiding techniques. When he gets to a stage in the game like he was at there where he's so far ahead that there's basically no chance he could lose, he stops going through the motions of, gaining every little edge he can gain because it doesn't matter. He would rather just win the game quickly and move on and have more of a clock to work with. When you've got 7 action spells in your hand and your opponent's drawing off the top and you have a Torrential Gearhulk and a Teferi in play and you're still activating your Azcanta the Sunken Ruin and every single turn and then untapping it and then activating it again. That's just every single time you do that, that's 10 to 15 seconds that you're not going to have for game 3. And Luis is really good at deciding when he needs to just stop wasting time and end things.
I mean, a phenomenal example of this is the Pro Tour that he won earlier this year.
Yeah, he won with a Lantern.
Lantern Control. He's no stranger to these slower decks, and he's no stranger to knowing when he actually needs to make an action and when it's just going to continue moving forward, and he can just move forward with the situation.
I really like the story of his friends and family watching at home the Pro Tour and winning, because he was playing Lantern, and even his friends who played some Magic, they were all watching the Pro Tour, like their friend, their family member is in the top 8 of the Pro Tour, is having this really big life moment, and they just have no idea whether or not he's winning or losing at any moment. They just were so confused. Their friends that were trying to explain how Magic worked, it didn't make any sense to anybody.
I mean, Lantern's
It's
not
great.
conventional Magic. Like, normally you can look at it and say, okay, well, who's got more things? Like, that's a good indicator. Or who's got more life? That's a good indicator. Lantern just throws all of that completely out the window. It's got this completely sideways game plan. Nice of them to watch, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Man, that's good support.
Yeah.
All right, it's time for Game 3. Esper Control versus Black-Red Aggro. We are going to have Aggro on the play. What kind of big changes in the dynamic are you seeing in that?
So, I mean, I think it means that Luis needs an even better draw in terms of the way it lines up against the threats that Tyler has. Tyler here mulliganing. I'm not sure if he had mulliganed that last game, but I think Tyler's first plan of action is to have more than one land. It's really important for him. Secondly, he needs an aggressive start, because if he lets things get to a later stage of the game without applying good pressure, then it's going to be really, really easy for Luis to just deal with his threats. And once he gets to the point where Luis is just casting cards like Vraska's Contempt, there's very little that Tyler can do. Yeah, he just needs to be aggressive.
B, aggressive.
Yeah.
B-E, aggressive. Okay, I like it. It's going to be the aggressive deck trying to do what it does best up against Esper Control, the one-for-oneing machine of counterspells, of removal, of Teferi, and Torrential Gearhulk. These are really two of the premier decks that we have seen. Esper Control taking a win 1 week ago at a Grand Prix, and Black-Red Aggro dominating this format, looking to take its seat, looking to take its throne back at the end of this weekend.
Yeah, and Tyler here with the perfect turn 1 play, that Beaumont Courier. I feel like a broken record. I've been saying it so much today.
Beaumont Courier.
It's the perfect card when you're playing against these blue strategies in Standard right now.
It delivers, you know?
Well,
it was a well-named card.
Tyler, once again, only one land.
Sure. All right, so it's the Beaumont Courier and the Soulscar Mage and a mountain facing down Luis Salvato. If you're Salvato, are you breathing just a huge sigh of relief looking at that? Missing land drops for this red deck? I think there's a very common thought process that most red decks, these aggressive decks, can afford to miss land drops. And I think that is not the case here in Standard with these black-red decks.
Oh, yeah. I mean, decks are a lot more mana hungry than they used to be. Just the sheer power level of cards means that we're starting to see decks that play 1-drops alongside 4 and 5-drops, which is something that we never saw before. Oh, my goodness gracious.
Let's go for it. Trick shot there
Whoa,
on the Soulscar Mage.
Okay.
We got to look, and there is a land.
Yeah, but he's got 2 cards.
This is rough times. So
Wow.
the functional mulligan here down to, man, that's like a functional mulligan down to 3 at the end of things.
Yeah.
And we are going to see that Fatal Push eliminate the Soulscar Mage. It's an empty board, 3 cards in hand against a full grip and a mana advantage from Luis Salvato, and it's just a pass of the turn as well.
Yeah, I mean, Tyler, it looks like he still has a decent number of reactive cards left in his deck here post-board, and this is not going to work out well for him. And we see that Luis has interactive spells in hand. He has things like Cast Down. He has a Disallow. He has a Teferi. This is a really, really bad spot for Tyler.
Yeah. None of these cards are actually phenomenal answers to specifically the Scrap Heap Scrounger.
That's
because
true. That's true.
They aren't exile. So right now, a lot of Tyler Kennedy's hopes are probably relying on this 3-2 that attacks pretty well. In Essence Scatter, taking down the Beaumont Courier. But if this attacks in, it's not going to get removed. We're going to end up down to 13. And I think that is entirely what Kennedy is hoping to carry him to the end at this point.
Yeah.
5 mana. It's Teferi. There's still a Cast Down available in hand, as well as these Torrential Gearhulks. The Cast Down, while it does not permanently answer the Scrap Heap Scrounger, is able to protect the Teferi if Luis Salvato values that highly enough. But at the end of the day, it's also a hit for 3. Teferi will survive it.
Yeah, now Tyler, with as few cards as he has, if he starts attacking this Teferi, then, with the cast down there, I guess it's just irrelevant.
Yep, cast down eliminates it. It's a pass back, 4 mana open, and still none of it being used. We cashed in all of our cards for mana, and it seems like we came away with just a 1-for-1 trade, and I think really Tyler was hoping to end up with a nice mix of the two, but we have seen so few spells cast after the fact. So we're going to exile this Beaumont Courier, bring back the Scrap Heap Scrounger, but now there's 6 mana available. Torrential Gearhulk lined up, and while this duress is going to come down, that can't hit the Torrential Gearhulk, but let's go for it anyway. Let's Essence Scatter it to keep the information in our hands secret and put down the 5/6. What else are you going to do? Nothing. It's a pass back to Salvato. Tyler Kennedy, his Scrap Heap Scrounger can't even block, and it can't even attack.
Yeah, and I mean, that was a great series of things to happen for Luis, because the only black mana that Tyler had got tapped, so Tyler doesn't even get an opportunity to try to use the unlicensed disintegration that he has on this Torrential Gearhulk. It means that Luis will have counter magic available to protect it. Yeah, at this point, Luis has
control of the
everything.
court.
Exactly. Once again.
Essence Scatter in hand, Vraska's Contempt in hand. Really just. All right, it's going to be unlicensed disintegration coming down, pointing at that Torrential Gearhulk, and Salvato's going to allow it?
No, just give him like a glimmer of hope.
Oh, Okay, so we're going to take that one down in response. So Vraska's Contempt eliminates the Scrap Heap Scrounger. That does mean the Torrential Gearhulk will still leave, but it does mean that the 3 damage is not dealt because the artifact is no longer controlled. Salvato, no way to stop that particular interaction, but at the end of the day, he does still have 2 more Torrential Gearhulks in the waiting.
Yeah, and I mean, the actual body, the 5/6 body, is hardly relevant for Luis. I mean, he has inevitability.
Yep.
The longer the game goes, the better he is going to be doing. So
it's going to be Fatal Push taking down this Karizev. You can always tell when Paul's on the card reader.
Yeah.
He's just the best at it. So we have got a Teferi emblem online. Every draw at this point is going to exile a permanent. We're going to try and throw down this Glorybringer. Is it going to be enough to try and take us to the end? It's going to be Torrential Gearhulk. Is this post-resolution and Vraska's Contempt? Yes, it is. 2 more life, and that's just a handshake. Tyler Kennedy, he knows it. He sees the writing on the wall, and Luis Salvato, his seat in day 2 is secured. Now, Tyler Kennedy, he's still got some fighting to do. He's going to have to head into the next round, and he's going to be in a fight to maintain the last win needed to show up tomorrow for day 2. You got to be X2.
Yeah. We need to make it through the first day, go 6-2, win 75% of your matches, or get some free wins just by being awesome.
Absolutely. So with that, we are going to have more Magic coming up right after this. Welcome back here to round 7 at Grand Prix Los Angeles. Look at me, I'm getting ahead of myself. TJ Rogers here with Jake Van Lunen, and we're going to be heading into some more of the Time Walk magic. And let's go ahead and head on down to it. It's going to be a deck that we have been seeing throughout the day. So round 7 here, Tom Martel against Peter On. It is Esper Control, one that we've seen quite a bit. But Black-Green Constrictor, when's the last time you saw this many of this Constrictor deck?
I don't know. I feel like we've been seeing a lot of it this weekend, and it surprises me because you look through this standard metagame, and this does not seem like a deck that would be particularly well positioned. But we keep getting deeper and deeper in the tournament, and we keep on seeing this deck on camera. This deck is in the hands of a lot of players who are XO and a lot of players who are X1. We haven't seen it win on camera yet, but
we will. One of these days. This could be the one. Essence Scatter takes down the Winding Constrictor. We did see that. Llanowar Elf just attack in for one, did not need the extra mana. It's going to be a Thorn Lieutenant joining the battlefield. This is the 2-3, backing it up with another one. 2 Lieutenants. We have got the full hierarchy, well, I guess side by side. But these are 2-3s. They've got a fantastic amount of late game usability because you can invest that 6 mana to give them +4/+4. And very difficult to remove in any sort of meaningful way because if you target them, they're going to replace themselves with that 1/1 Elf Warrior, which that doesn't matter an enormous amount, but it's there. And it can attack, it can block, it can interact with the board.
yeah, it's that Doom Traveler-ness of it,
Yeah, except with a much better body, attacking in for 4 here and leaving back the Llanowar Elves. We saw that one get aggressive previously, but lining up 4 mana here right now, it's probably got a place to put it.
I would imagine.
Yeah, it's going to be Walking Ballista for 2 if there is no Essence Scatter, and it doesn't look like there is. The pressure is mounting. Tom Martel has not been able to do a whole lot. We saw it from him last time he was on camera. He loves this turn 4 Glimmer of Genius.
Yeah, and I feel like when Esper Control or Blue-White Control players have 4 mana untapped, that's a really good time to try to resolve, your spells that are not necessarily the most important, but spells that you just are trying to get on the table that would normally just be auto counters, because it forces your opponent to make that decision between, am I going to use a counter spell this turn, or am I going to cast Glimmer of Genius on their end step? And you really want to be thinking about those things when you already have pressure to apply on your opponent. Because if you're just doing that and you don't have anything on the table, and they can very easily just Glimmer and then do whatever they feel like.
Sure. Glimmer of Genius here. It is going to add that to energy. We're going to draw a couple of cards, and it's going to be right back to Tom Martel. But 2 Thorn Lieutenants, a Llanowar Elves, and this Walking Ballista. Martel already down to 15, and a pretty sizable amount looking to attack him next turn. Potentially up to 7 if this Llanowar Elf wants to join the fray. It's going to be Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, that comes down, and Len's going to see if this hero can save him. Draws a card. He's going to be untapping. He does have a copy of Fatal Push in hand, so he could eliminate one of these creatures, but not many good options for that. The Thorn Lieutenants? Nope, it's going to be just taking down the Llanowar Elf. Let's take away the mana advantage because there's still fine attackers on the battlefield, and now Peter On has the option of deciding between the Teferi or the player. Teferi it is.
A wise choice.
A wise choice. How about an option of pointing that Walking Ballista towards Tom Martel and then using one of these +1/+1 counters? Is there a lot of value in retaining those +1/+1 counters?
Yeah, I mean, you want to build them up over the course of time because they represent more damage with each attack. Then they're also good at pressuring planeswalkers that you're able to poke in a little bit of damage at, but not a ton. And it's also just a good card for making sure they don't gain life with a Vraska's Contempt, providing those final points of damage. We've talked about reach a bit this weekend, the concept that once you get your opponent to a low enough life total, you can use particular spells to deal those final points of damage. And Walking Ballista is a card that, while it's been in Standard, it's given green decks and black decks an amount of reach that they've never really had before. And as a result, that's why aggressive decks of those colors have had success.
Yeah, and of course the cost of, if you spend that 1 +1/+1 counter to take down the Teferi, you're attacking for half as much every future turn of the game. Every time that you want to get aggressive, you invested that +1/+1 counter away from the card and into that Teferi. So we do still have the 3 mana. It's 6 mana on the opposing side. 6 open mana in an Esper Control deck. What are you worried about right now?
I'm worried about Torrential Gearhulk.
And there it is, crashing on in.
Yeah, now this is where we see the Esper control deck start to pull ahead. Tom's life total still a healthy 15. He's going to be able to flash back either this Glimmer or a Fatal Push. And a Fatal Push taking out the Glint Sleeve Siphoner means he's just going to be able to block one of these Thorn Lieutenants.
You know, Fatal Push being the best removal spell in the graveyard at this stage in the game has got to be negative news for Martel. You know, he has not been able to find any of these Vraska's Contempts. He's not been able to fire down any cast downs. That was pretty much it. That was the removal spell that he's had access to so far. And considering that, he's been doing a great job of maintaining his life total, making sure that he's not under too much pressure when he hasn't really had access to those early game resources to slow it down.
Yeah, I mean, this game, it looked in the beginning like Peter On had just about a perfect start. He had everything he wanted to be doing. Obviously, it wasn't the absolute perfect draw, but you can't really ask for much better than that in a normal game. And
so Vraska's Contempt there points at the Glint Sleeve Siphoner during the main phase so that at the upkeep they cannot pay the 2 energy to draw a card, but we then see from Peter On the activation of that Walking Ballista, 1 damage going towards the Glint Sleeve Siphoner. Now what that does is it means that it is dying to that card rather than to the Vraska's Contempt. It's going to go to the graveyard rather than exile, and Tom is not going to be gaining the 2 life that card would give him.
Precisely. So Tom doesn't get to gain 2 life, and any potential Scrap Heap Scroungers that are drawn in the future will have more fodder to work with.
Ravenous Chupacabra comes on down to the battlefield, plays dead for just a moment like any good dog will, and then it's back up on the battlefield and it's ready to jump on into the fray. Swing in for 3, and Martel finds himself down to 10, looking down 3 creatures, but he does have another copy of Torrential Gearhulk in hand, and this time the removal spell floating around in the graveyard is that Vraska's Contempt. Not a whole lot of options in the way of, some of the green decks that we've seen. Oftentimes you'll expect to see something like Blossoming Defense. Not really in this deck to the same capacity. I don't think I see any.
Yeah, he's playing 0 copies of Blossoming Defense, which is quite surprising. And that's a card that it gives this deck the ability to punish people for playing cards like Vraska's Contempt and leaning on them really hard.
And maybe just hoping that the Thorn Lieutenant will do a good enough job of it. We do see the attack all out. Torrential Gearhulk rejoins the battlefield, eliminates the Chupacabra, jumps in front of the Walking Ballista, which just throws its +1/+1 counter. And now it is a Thorn Lieutenant trying to pull rank on this board alongside this Thrashing Brontodon, the 3/4. That one can, however, destroy the Gearhulk. I wonder if that whole turn, how it would have looked if Peter had played that one down maybe pre-combat as a precaution against that much open mana.
Yeah, Tom did have counter magic in hand, so it's very likely that the Brontodon would have gotten countered. Tom would have had a much different play, but that also means that Peter would have gotten in a pretty clean attack. And getting in a clean attack and still having that Walking Ballista on the board, that could have really changed things. And Peter might have been able to steal this first game had he made the line that you just suggested.
So it's going to be another copy of that Brontodon hitting the battlefield. There is a Syncopate, a Glimmer of Genius, and yet another Torrential Gearhulk in hand for Tom Martel. But the issue so far has just been he doesn't have enough removal to actually keep casting it with this Torrential Gearhulk. He's looking more at, counter spells or Glimmer of Genius. He could fire that one down, and this might be the Glimmer of Genius looking for that either Vraska's Contempt, Essence Scatter, something like that. So we're going to take a look at the top 2. It's Scry 2, then Draw 2. He likes one of them, a land going to the bottom. We're going to draw those, and we're going to add a little bit of energy, 4 energy, on standby. And I think that might have been an Essence Scatter that actually got drawn. So if he values this highly enough, he could fire that one down. There's also a Syncopate that he'd be able to use, and that's actually going to be the option he goes for. The blue mana, and then X equals 2. Peter On cannot pay the 2 mana. That's going to go to exile. Sacrifice this, take down the Gearhulk. It's an attack in for 2. Martel is going to have to take this swing, but he's going to untap with a game plan.
Yeah, now he's got the Gearhulk in hand. He has enough mana so that he can cast his Disallow, also cast a Gearhulk. Right now this Gearhulk is going to be flashing back a Glimmer of Genius. Tom just with an embarrassment of riches. Once these Esper control decks start winning, they win real hard, as we've seen throughout the weekend.
Yeah, every single time. It feels like once they hit that stage in the game where they've got that 6 to 8 mana, and they've got either the Torrential Gearhulks or the Teferis or the Azcanta, the Sunken Rune online, it just seems like the games that looked like they were so touch and go, they were so nitty-gritty down to the percentage points, and then it feels like someone just pulled the rug out from under their opponent. I mean, Peter On, this game looked really close. It even looked actually toward Peter On in the early stage of the game.
Yeah,
And
it looked like it
now-
was heavily in his favor.
Now he's just got nothing going on. His play right now is a Walking Ballista for 1, and he's going to try and get it done with that. Torrential Gearhulk on the battlefield. That's going to close the game out in just 4 short turns as that one actually starts to connect with Peter On's life total. In the meantime, it's going to be Glimmer of Genius continuing to fire that one down and make sure that the cards in hand remain relevant, that you've got lots of them, and more importantly, that you've got more of them. Fatal Push is the draw. We've also got some more land available. That's going to take down the Walking Ballista, which will deal 1 damage to Martel, who is down to 6. A lot of work being done, and you were talking about, there's a lot more reach in in this deck than there used to be, but we've already seen 2 of the Walking Ballistas. It's going to be a big task for them to deal that final 6 points, and any other fair creature trying to get this done by attacking is going to be rough.
Yeah, and Tom also, he's 3 hard counterspells left in hand. He has that Syncopate, and then he has a pair of Disallows, I believe. A pair of Disallows.
Wow. Verdurous Gearhulk, counter that one. We've still got another. We're going to go ahead and just attack with the Torrential Gearhulk, not even bother untapping it. Just immediately point at, this is good. This is attacking. Let's do it. That's going to take that one down, and let's head on into game 2. Tom Martel up 1. It's going to be Peter on the play. And it's going to be an irrigated farmland for Martel. You've got a little bit of access to the information of these sideboards. As we head into this one, it's Constrictor versus Esper Control. Do you think one player is significantly favored over the other?
I do. I think Esper Control is a pretty strong favorite in a matchup like this. Peter On is the aggressor. He needs to be gaining an advantage early. The fact that he doesn't have access to anything like a Blossoming Defense here means that it's going to be really hard for him. Post-board, he does have some really nice cards for the matchup, but he didn't draw any of them in these early turns of the game, and that's really when you need something like a Shaper Sanctuary. When you draw that off the top of your library later on, it's significantly less powerful than if it was in your opening hand.
We do have this Search for Azcanta on the battlefield here for Tom Martel, currently taking a look at that top card of the library. Where does he want it? Torrential Gearhulk is going to go to the graveyard. He's got other priorities here on turn 3.
Yeah, and he just wants to stave off the aggression from Peter On right now. Once he gets to the stage of the game where that Search for Azcanta flips into Azcanta the Sunken Ruin, Tom's just going to be, kind of cruising. Life's going to be easy.
Doomfall, let's take a look at the hand. There's Vivian Reed and Verdurous Gearhulk. 2 really excellent 5-mana plays. Vivian Reed, a new Planeswalker out of Core Set 2019, and it's actually been showing up quite a bit. In fact, if I remember right, I believe that in the Pro Tour, there were more copies of Vivian Reed than there were of Nicol Bolas, if I do remember correctly, which I think that I do, which is why I'm saying it. But it's 5 mana, 5 loyalty when it enters the battlefield, +1 to take a look at the top 4. You can grab a creature or a land, sort of like a little bit of a boosted up Adventurous Impulse.
Mm-hmm.
It's got that -3 that destroys an artifact, an enchantment, or a creature with flying, so kind of a naturalized plummet hybrid there. And then eventually, if you get to it, that -8 creatures you control get +2/+2, vigilance, trample, and indestructible. If that doesn't end a game, I don't know what will.
And it's an emblem, so it's like a permanent thing that your opponent cannot interact with.
And so that Vivian Reed, Tom Martel, he's going to respect it the appropriate amount, send that one right to exile. And it's going to be the Glintstream Siphoner and the Walking Ballista trying to get it done. We do see another +1/+1 counter end up on this Walking Ballista, though.
Yeah.
Mana Sinks are good.
Mana Sinks are very good, and now Peter On even has a Verdurous Gearhulk here. And he doesn't know, but Tom Martel is currently shields down, does not have a counterspell for that Verdurous Gear Hulk. So if Peter On were to go for that and just dump a whole bunch of counters onto this Walking Ballista, that could be a serious problem for Tom Martel.
Still might be the case. We're going to go ahead and add another counter to this one. It's going to be an attack in for 3. We did say 2 life gained from Tom Martel, and now it is going to be a tapped land. It's a Blooming Marsh, so it's only going to enter untapped if it's one of the first, second, or third lands of the game for you.
Yeah, so it's possible that Peter On just did not have an untapped 5th land there.
Though the shields are still down, it is a Vraska's Contempt and a land. This is not the best position to be in. Now we are looking at the top card through the Search for Azcanta. We see Tom Martel really giving it some evaluation in his mind as to whether or not this is the card that he wants, or, you know, there's this aspect of the devil you know, the devil you don't, you know?
Yeah.
You're looking at the top card, you know what that one is, and if it isn't what you want, is it better than your average card?
Yeah, and I don't know if that's necessarily the best way to think about it. I like to dream big.
Sure.
With these types of things. I want the best card. Because if I bin something, or a card that's putting me in a better position to win. If I'm like losing, I need to be looking for a card that's actually going to give me a chance to win the game.
Looks like that card that he was considering, by the way, Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. That land in hand was a fetid pool, so it did enter the battlefield tapped. His game plan right now, cast this Vraska's Contempt. The last counters will be going at Tom Martel, and he's going to untap with this Teferi and hope that that can carry him the weight of the game. But it's going up against Vraska now.
Wow.
Relic Seeker hitting the battlefield, and we're going to be watching a good, I guess not old-fashioned. They're still among the newer things of the game in the grand scheme of things, but, you know, we'll call it that anyway. Good old-fashioned Planeswalker battle. Just like in 1994 when you were the Planeswalkers.
Yeah.
So it's the 6-mana Vraska Relic Seeker. 6 starting loyalty. We saw it do a -3, which is destroy target artifact, creature, or enchantment, eliminating that Search for Azcanta, also creating a treasure. The +2 ability is going to create some 2/2 black pirate creatures.
With Menace.
With Menace.
Yeah.
Means that they're going to be really solid against anything like a Torrential Gear Hulk. There's not a whole lot of creatures that come in for Esper control. And eventually, the -10, if you get to it, Tom Martel's life will become 1.
Yeah, and it's pretty easy to get to it. Vraska +2s.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Vraska comes down with a lot of loyalty. So
6 starting loyalty and a +2, and you only need the -10 to activate that. So we have got ourselves that menacing pirate on the battlefield that is probably going to get replaced with one of the other tokens here shortly. Otherwise, it is Walking Ballista. And Verdurous Gear Hulk, Essence Scatter, or I'm sorry, Disallow, is going to eliminate that one. But there is still 3 power on this battlefield. Tom Martel, he's got to come up with something to do, and he's going to try drawing a card. Finds himself another copy of Disallow. Let's go ahead and fire off this Irrigated Farmlands. It's a Fatal Push. It's a Disallow. He can remove the Walking Ballista before there's an untap. But this Vraska is so far doing exactly what it wants to with this game.
yeah. Vraska is a really powerful Magic card. It's a card that I expected to make a lot of waves in Standard over the course of its time in the format. It's already done quite a bit of work, and I imagine once we have a rotation, we're going to be seeing even more of the Relic Seeker.
Yep, Fatal Push here pointing at this Walking Ballista. It's going to be 1 damage heading away. And now the question is, we do have these pirates. They've got Menace. They're going to be attacking for 2. But with Tom Martel at 7 and Teferi at 6, where are your priorities at this stage in the game? You know, are you looking to close the game out as quickly as you possibly can by going face? Or are you going to take the time to make sure that this Teferi is not going to be the answer for Tom Martel? Now, it is only 2 damage, which might affect that.
Yeah, I like going to face, and I like that Peter agrees with me there.
Disallow is going to eliminate that Thrashing Brontodon, and it's going to be now 2 of these pirates. That's 4 power on the battlefield. Martel at 5, you know? And the question here is, do you give Tom Martel more of these extra draws by attacking the Teferi or by attacking the face? And I think because it has that plus ability and the 2 damage coming in, you're just not going to eliminate the Teferi fast enough. If you had 6 power on the battlefield, then maybe you change your mind. Though I guess then you still might go face with Tom Martel at 7. All right, it's two pirates. They're crashing on in, and Martel just does not have the right answers right now. There's going to be another copy of Vivian Reed, and if this isn't going to be an answer, this card is going to continue to fill up the hand. Taking a look at the top four, a land or a creature is going to end up in there. Walking Ballista of all cards.
Yeah, that's a real nice one to have.
Doesn't matter how you try and answer this board, it's going to be a bad time. And that's going to do it, I think, using that treasure token along with the one land to just get that final point of damage. Peter On is going to come away with a win, and these two are going to be taking it to a game 3. This is the battle for day 2 for these players. The player that comes away with this game, smooth sailing.
Yeah, now, we've watched an Esper control deck already play against, or I guess it was a blue-black deck play against Constrictor deck earlier today. And both Shaper Sanctuary and Lifecrafter's Bestiary were really big focal points of games 2 and 3.
Yes.
Here, Peter On does have those in his sideboard, but it's important to note that you have to draw them in the early turns of the game for them to really be worthwhile. If you end up drawing them later on in the game, then they're pretty much lackluster. They are weaker than natural draws for the most part.
Yeah, Lifecrafter's Bestiary when you're in top deck mode, just so much worse because you are still victim to the top of your library if you can find a creature even to get that engine started. The Scry helps, but on turn 3, Bestiary is just on another level from that.
Yeah, and I think that, an interesting, well, that's a really important one.
Shaper Sanctuary coming down to the battlefield, single green, and if any of Peter On's creatures become the target of a spell or ability that Martel controls, Peter On is going to get to draw a card.
Yeah. Tom definitely going to disallow this. Knows how important it is.
And actually, we see a duress. Now, I'm very curious about the sequencing of this, actually. If you have a card like Shaper Sanctuary, which is such a critical piece of your game plan, why not lead with the duress to take a look to see if the way is clear or to eliminate any counterspells, then follow up with the Shaper Sanctuary?
I think it was a mistake. And it's okay. We all make mistakes. But, Tom did not have the mana to play that Frascus Contempt. If Peter On had cast duress first, taken the disallowed out of his hand, and then resolved the Shaper Sanctuary and left Tom with just a 1-for-1 removal spell that would draw Peter a card, Peter would have been in an excellent position to win this game. So I think it was just a mistake. Not a particularly large mistake, but it could end up costing him this match.
Yeah, not having that Shaper Sanctuary, it'll be curious to see as if these removal spells start coming down on Peter On's creatures, how many situations there may have been in which drawing that one card, drawing multiple cards, potentially could have really saved him the game. But we'll have to see what happens. It's Glintsleeve Siphoner attacking on in right now. Martel with 4 open mana. Looks like we're going to throw down a Blooming Marsh, a Thrashing Brontodon, and I think the only thing standing in its way, can't quite tell what that one is. Does it look like a Torrential Gearhulk to you? No, it's a Disallow. Okay, so we're going to counter that one, and now it's 2 lands in hand for Martel. If one of these is a cycler, we'll probably see him cycle a Fetid Pools. He's been doing that one quite a bit. They're actually both of the cycle lands. Irrigated Farmlands, the other. And that's going to be what he cycles. He finds another Irrigated Farmlands. This is not good for Tom Martel.
No, Tom, could find himself a victim to a Glintsleeve Siphoner just getting way out of hand.
And the only thing that right now that, Martel has working towards him is that the pressure, and I say this as we're tapping out for, a Walking Ballista, that right now the pressure isn't enormous. You only have the land in hand, but at least heading into this turn, it was an 8-turn clock. Now it has just gotten shortened significantly to 4 turns. And that's if nothing else changes. It's going to be Search for Azcanta that hits the battlefield, and we're still in a very precarious position. Peter On is going to untap, have the capacity to attack in for 4, possibly attack in for 5 if you just activate this. Uh-oh. Essence Scatter.
Very nice answer there in Tom's hand. Tom getting lucky.
If you're going to have one card, that's the one.
Yeah.
Eliminate that from the contention. It's still going to be the attack in for 4, and we are living off the top of the library. Search for Azcanta throws this land to the graveyard. Let's transform it so that even if we get a dead draw, we can start really digging for the cards that we need. But it's 6 mana right now. Torrential Gearhulk now live because of that transformation. I'm seeing 2 mana put to the side, though, or possibly 4 mana put to the side for that Ascanta.
It's looking like Tom may want to activate this on his main phase. There are positive things for waiting and positive things for doing it on your main phase. If you're able to find yourself a Fatal Push, then you can deal with the Walking Ballista before giving your opponent an opportunity to untap with that mana. If you are saving it for their turn, then you're protecting the card you get off of that Ascent of the Sunken Ruin from something like a Duress.
Mm-hmm. Looks like it is going to be Forsake the Worldly and a land. It looks like that is going to be the take. I couldn't quite tell what that last card is, but Forsake the Worldly is where we're at. It will have the ability to attack that Walking Ballista or cycle, either one, whichever one that that Martel really sees as the advantageous option. But I don't think either one of those are exactly where he wants to be.
Not at all. I mean, he needs inexpensive ways to interact with these creatures. His life total, 10 may seem pretty healthy, but Walking Ballista can close this game very fast.
Definitely something to remember is that even if Peter On attacks Martel down to 6 right now, in a lot of ways he's functionally at 4 because the Walking Ballista. That activated ability of the Walking Ballista, oh my, is free from a mana standpoint, which means that whatever +1/+1 counters you see on these creatures, you can assume that Martel is functionally at 3 right now unless something happens like a disallow, right? Countering the activated ability. But really, Martel needs to assume that he's at 3 life and any extra mana. There is 4 mana right now for Peter On. If he has the opportunity, he'll be activating one of these Walking Ballistas, put another +1/+1 counter on it, and that's 4 damage just floating around waiting for its time to strike.
Yeah, Tom, he went aggressively looking for Cleansing Nova. I think that's what he wanted more than anything, and he didn't find it. Now, 4 points for being represented just on the table with those 4 lands and the 3 counters already on Walking Ballistas.
And the only card in hand is a Disallow. In theory, it could prevent one of that damage by either the 4 mana activated ability or the activation of the removing the +1/+1 counter, but
he'd still be long dead.
Yep. When you're at 6, and it's very likely that we would see Peter On wait until he can untap and then attack before really starting to use those. So Martel, I think he's weighing the options right now. If I activate this Ascanta, what else could go wrong? We're going to cycle this Fetid Pools, looking for anything else. Finds a Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. But if he wants to... This is just a tough spot to be in.
It doesn't look like he really has a shot here.
He could play a land for the turn. He could go for this Teferi. That's what he's doing, but that does mean that he needs to draw a castable spell off the top because he can no longer cast that Disallow. That's not going to do it. Tom Martel is picking it up, and Peter On. Black-Green Constrictor continuing to put on a good show. Peter On is going to be in day 2, a deck that we haven't seen for a while. We weren't really expecting it. I don't think we even just, it entered into our discussion really as we were heading into the day, right before the event when we were grabbing some coffee, and we've seen it continually put up some fantastic results. It keeps showing up at the top tables.
Yeah, and I think it's funny because I keep on saying that, I guess this deck is doing well because of Shaper, Sanctuary, and Lifecrafter's Bestiary out of the sideboard, and then the players keep on either just not having those at all or losing when they do have those in the matchups that they want them.
Two things that we've seen, yeah.
Magic's crazy.
Whatever
it's
doing.
Also it's a really fun and interesting deck. It's a deck that has a lot of powerful interactions and does things that are really powerful for an aggressive creature deck. If you cast a Winding Constrictor on turn 2, you follow it up with Rishkar, Pima Renegade. That is a 4/5 and a 4/4 on the battlefield right away, and the 4/5 can even tap for mana right away. So this is a deck that does very powerful things, but is weak to spot removal, and there's a lot of spot removal running around.
Absolutely. So we are going to have another match to jump on down to here in round 7. It's going to be Corey Baumeister. Let's head on down. We'll head on down to it. One of these times. one of these times. He's going to be going up against Sam Perez as a notable thing. It's going to be black-red up against Esper. Control is going to be the matchup, and now we are going to be heading on down to it. So this is game 3. It is black-red aggro. We have already sideboarded Corey Baumeister, a prolific standard player.
Yes. He comes from good standard stock, if you will.
Yep. And it looks like actually we are having a little bit of a technical issue, so we are going to go ahead and jump on over to a commercial, but we will be back right after this.
Looking for a challenge? Magic Online offers monthly limited and constructed events which lead to the yearly Magic Online Championship. Download Magic Online at mtgo.com and start earning the points you need to enter.